progress.
Trustee Villalobos, will you please read the land acknowledgement?
The Pacifica School District acknowledges that we gather on the unceded ancestral homelands of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. As guests, we humbly extend our gratitude to the Ramaytush Ohlone elders and community. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland, and we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples. As the original stewards of this land, the Ramaytush Ohlone understand the interconnectedness of all things and the importance of maintaining harmony with nature. Likewise, Pacifica School District commits to teaching our school community how to be responsible stewards of this land.
The district digitally records the audio portion of the meetings. All recordings are kept in the superintendent's office for 30 days and are available during the time period for inspection by members of the public on district equipment without charge. In-person speakers wishing to address the board on agenda or non-agenda items, please complete a request card with your name, address, and the item number and submit it to the board president or the superintendent. You'll be called to address the board and may speak for up to 3 minutes. Virtual speakers wishing to address the board on agenda or non-agenda items, please submit your first and last name and agenda item you wish to speak on in the Q&A area of the webinar. Please do not submit comments or questions in the Q&A area. You will be called to address the board. Your microphone will be unmuted and you may speak up to 3 minutes. After you've spoken, your microphone will be muted.
So I need to do roll call.
And we'll now do roll call.
Trustee Riddle.
Here.
Trustee Burkini.
Here.
Trustee Doggett is absent. Trustee Patel.
Here.
Trustee Villalobos.
Here.
Thank you.
That? Okay. The board met in closed session regarding public employee performance evaluation. The board voted 4-0 to approve that agenda item.
As amended.
As amended. Let's see. Are there any questions regarding the minutes of May 18th, 2022, regular board meeting, the board meeting of the trustees? Any questions?
No questions.
Right. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes on May 18th, May 18th, 2022, regular board meeting of trustees?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of May 18, 2022.
I'll second.
All in favor? Barbara, if you can take the vote.
Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
All items on the consent agenda will be approved with one motion, which is not debatable and which requires a unanimous vote for passage. If any member of the board, the superintendent, or the public so requests, any item shall be removed from this section and placed in the regular order of business following approval of the consent agenda. Are there any questions regarding the agenda or consent agenda?
I actually have a recommendation. The student achievement formative assessment update is at the end of the agenda, and it makes sense that it would go right before the LCAP. And so I would propose that we move that item up to be the first item of business.
Okay. Anything else?
Or the other, actually, let me just be more clear on that. I can give a COVID update in 2 minutes or less, and then we'll do the student formative assessment.
Okay. Any other questions or changes? All right. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda with the changes suggested by the superintendent?
I'll motion to approve.
And a second?
I'll second.
And Barbara, will you take the vote?
Yes, all in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
All right, so move on to communications. Where read this part?
Communications, yes, you do.
Okay, so speakers wishing to address the board on agenda items or non-agenda items, okay, we already said it. Please submit your first and last name and agenda item in the, if you wish to speak on or in the Q&A area of the webinar. Our first group up is LSCA. Do we have a representative from LSCA?
There she is. Hi.
Is the sound? You need me louder or you need to turn yourself louder?
You're good. You're perfect now. Thank you.
Okay. At the last board meeting, I thought it was the last one of the school year. That makes writing my statement for tonight much easier because I can repeat most of it and it is all worth repeating. LSCA remains hopeful for a final agreement at our next and final bargaining session tomorrow. We are eager to bring good news to our members at our meeting tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. A majority of our members have the daunting task of packing up their valuables and vacating their classrooms on the last day of school. We hope all the work in the school buildings this summer is done seamlessly so that teachers can use the time after the August 13th move-in to prepare their rooms and curriculum for the first day of school. We are all deserving of a good summer break, and LSEA is hopeful we have more to celebrate after tomorrow afternoon, after our final negotiation session of the school year. Thank you.
A representative from CSCA.
Patrick Sayers. There you go.
Here I am. The sound is okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. Hello, my name is Nicole Sayers, and I am the president of the CSEA. There are only 6 days left until the end of the school year. We can all see the light, and although it has been a very long year, I would like to thank my fellow CSEA members for always going above and beyond, for stepping up when the need was there, and for always supporting our students, families, teachers, and the district as a whole. I am very proud to represent you the best that I can. Tonight, I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge Rebecca McMillan, a school assistant at Valamar, Gloria Iave, a paraprofessional in our special education department, and Barbara Facenda, the school secretary at Valamar. All three of these members have retired this year after many years of service to the Pacifica School District. CSEA is proud of them and happy for them. We hope they enjoy their time moving forward. I would also like to acknowledge both Gerald Keller and Vincent Ayala for their 7 years of service to the Pacifica School District as groundskeepers. Unfortunately, they did not retire this year. Instead, they both resigned from their positions. Both these members resigned because they felt micromanaged, they felt they were continuously being told what to do, and never being told they were doing a good job. CSEA regrets the way Vince and Jerry left the district and wish that they had been able to leave with the same grace that Rebecca, Gloria, and Barbara did. Every CSEA member who works in this district should feel encouraged, important, and valued by their supervisors and management. That is one way that we will retain employees. As always, I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you. All right, next, people wishing to address the board.
We have Jane Solano, will speak during public comment. And then there's also Dawn Rage.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, can you see me? Oh,
We
Okay.
cannot. We just hear your voice.
okay, great. I'm Jane Solano. I'm a teacher at IBL. I teach 6th grade language arts and social studies. And I wanted to say thank you to the board members for their service, first of all. I haven't been to a board meeting in quite a while and feel bad about that. So I want to try to become more involved in the coming year. But the reason I'm speaking tonight, I wanted to comment on some information I learned today at IBL. in our staff meeting. Apparently, we will be required to reduce our staff by one full-time employee, which will result in a redistribution of our school programs and basically a jamming of all of our classes to the limit. And I'm concerned about that because I feel like we won't be able to offer the best experience possible for our students. I think if parents become aware of this, that they're going to be very unhappy. There's not going to be any flexibility to adjust for special needs once the school year starts, especially because everything will be jam-packed. It seems that this decision about staffing is being pushed on our school despite concerns from people who understand this problem way better than I do. It's, I know, very complex, but the people involved at our school with scheduling, I think, understand quite well what the negative consequences are going to be, and I'm starting to be very concerned about that. So I hope you'll pay attention to this issue so IBL can retain our excellence as a middle school program, not a K through 8. We are different, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jane. The next one is Don Reach.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. Good evening. My name is Dawn Regi, and I'm a parent of a second grade student at Ortega Elementary, and I'm also the PTO Parent Council representative. I'd like to first thank the Board of Trustees and District Office representatives for attending the Elna Flynn Outstanding Awards celebration, and also for donating and administering COVID rapid tests to provide an extra layer of protection for attendees and also the Pacifica community. Jokingly, nothing really says community building like rapid tests, and the celebration has been a long time coming. So we're very, very appreciative of all of your support. I'm also calling to express my concern about the current state of Ortega's school grounds. The area surrounding the school was probably last weed whacked in late March or the beginning of April. And the weeds in front of and along the side of the school are now waist high, and that's for an adult. We know that ticks are prevalent in Pacifica, and tall grass doesn't attract ticks, but the current state of the weeds makes it easier for the ticks to latch on to animals and then also our students that pass by. My daughter has had a tick pulled off of her a week ago. So Nicole Sayers just spoke to this a little bit about the grounds crew, but I have heard that there's no current grounds crew employed by Pacifica School District and that the work is being contracted out. And if this is true, it just doesn't seem to be working. Ortega has a field day and also promotion next week. So we'd really like this issue addressed rapidly. I am happy to go out to the school with my weed whacker. And I can probably get a lot of parents to join me in doing that if we're allowed to, and if we can't address the issue in a timely manner. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Don.
All right, do we have any other people wishing to address the board?
We do not.
All right, and correspondence?
I do not have any.
Okay. And then the board and superintendent communications.
I can start if you'd like. As she mentioned, we were at the Elna Flynn Awards, which was a really wonderful evening, even though COVID and masks and so forth, everyone really, was well attended and a lot of fun. We had a work study meeting last week, and there were workforce housing meetings both by Zoom that I attended and in person today. So hopefully we're making some progress there. And also weekly meetings with Dr. Olson. So not too much since it's only been about a week or two since we
I also did the work study and attended the Elna Flynn dinner. And I just want to say this was my first Elna Flynn dinner and reception. And it was so heartwarming to hear the principals talk about the volunteers and to hear each of the volunteers' story. It was such a memorable night for me. So congratulations to all the winners and all of the volunteers in general. That was great.
I also attended the work study meeting on the special education program. Very good information out of there, and I apologize, there's some major stakeholders who were unable to attend because of the PTO meetings happening on the same night. Also attended the open house at Ocean Shore, and I went early. I'd say I was the first one there with my daughter. And we had the privilege of walking through the deep sea halls, which was incredible. If nobody's seen the deep seas, it's really worth going. And each hallway for each different group of kids is designed by them, and one of them can be underwater for 2,000 feet, and they'll show you all the different fish that live there, plants. It was incredible. And then I also had time, which I never really usually have time on open house nights, to talk with the front office staff, Patty. And I really enjoyed hearing, how things are going for her.
Patricia Buddington?
Yeah. And also Virginia, I think she's a 4th grade teacher. She was explaining the deep seas to me because I think with the pandemic, I just missed that somehow and not going. So that's all I did.
All right. I also attended the Elma Flynn, and again, it's a great community event. It was great to get everybody back together once again. Also attended a lot of the workforce housing meetings and the work study. Since it is the end of the year meeting, I did kind of want to give a shout out to a couple things we've done this year. Number one is that we were able to feed any child that wanted to eat for lunch and breakfast all year for free, which I think and the bottom line in some households is added, and then also the stress on children who are feeling hungry and not being afraid to ask anymore for food. I think that's awesome that we're doing that in our state. Also, we made it through the whole year without shutting down a single class through 2 bumps, and I think we should all, all of you, thank you so much, because there was a few days this year I wasn't sure we were going to make it.
There were a few days this month I wasn't, there last month I wasn't sure we were going to make it.
So anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge that, and then also today's the first day of LGBTQIA plus Pride Month, so I want to acknowledge that also, so happy Pride. And that's it for me today.
Great. I'll just do a quick shout out to Elma Flynn, Don Rigi and Michelle Gray for their leadership. When they first told me they were doing it, I'm like, come on, we're not going to really be able to do something like that. And to just have the courage to pull something off like that, the energy that was in the room was so incredible. People were so happy to be together. And I thought to myself as I was leaving that night that the energy that's in that room is going to give us the energy to get through hard things when we need to. And it was really very, very heartwarming. So very thankful and grateful for the work that's happening at the school site right now. People are working their tails off, and we have 6 more days, and it's not easy to go into construction. It's an added layer of stress, but at the end, we will be grateful that the work is done.
All right. Okay, so on to district business, district goals. The district values the goals provided in our local control accountability plan and strategic plan. All of our district board agenda items are tied to these goals. 1 or more goals are listed in the description of each board agenda item. The details of each of those district goals can be accessed on the district website at www.pacificasd.org. So our first item is the COVID update.
Yep, and I can give that very quickly. Is 2 weeks ago was our highest number of COVID cases. It came down last week, and not just because we couldn't keep up with it, but those numbers were slower over the Memorial Day weekend. There were still some notifications, but it was in the 20 to 30 range versus 80. The state is starting to talk about what testing would look like next year, and the biggest piece of that framework that came out is just a transition around surveillance testing to response testing, so that if there is a positive case, responding with a rapid antigen test rather than a PCR test. It will be interesting to see what comes out of the budget and what California will be paying for. People say, are you gonna still do concentric next year? It really depends on what programs are being offered. We don't know that. I expect that it would be more and more rapid testing. Also, there's much more availability of over-the-counter tests for families to do at home. It's actually one of the reasons why we're finding a lot of positive cases is there were test kit went home right before Memorial Day, and a large number of people tested positive from that. What we would say is one of our recommendations at this point, and it's so hard to know when you go like this, but we're going to recommend having the COVID health assistance that we had this year to continue that for one more year, just in order to respond and respond quickly, as well as keep track of the paperwork and communicate with families. I think the total cost is about $220,000, but it's one person on each school site, and I think it would be a really good investment for us. So you don't need to vote on that. It just, I think from an operational standpoint, it just makes sense to do that.
Just one question. This year we sort of had a central hub here at the district office. Would there still be like a central person?
Yes, so Yolanda Pranzo will continue to be an admin assistant in student services. We probably will have a few more of the operational details be done at the school site, for example, just out of necessity, because Yolanda was on vacation last week, picking her son up, is that we asked the schools to help us with the COVID notifications, and they did, like, for example, Ocean Shore said there were positive cases in this class, and this class, so it was kind of an all-in-one piece. We didn't receive any negative feedback about that. People appreciate the effort that we're taking to make sure that those notifications go out. So more of that may happen at the school site, but we will still continue to have COVID go through the student services office. And the primary point person is John Bartfield with Yolanda Pranzo's amazing support. And then should anyone be bored because COVID isn't a big deal, we can do makeup from COVID. So making sure that we're addressing any issues around attendance or any learning issues, any additional health issues that may come up. I don't think we're going to be bored, but I think just became really clear this month that we would be foolish to let that position go at this point.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
So we will now move on to item I, which we moved up in the agenda.
And that is student formative assessment.
Student formative assessment update.
I think you might have stolen my pen.
Oh, I'm sorry, here you go.
Do you need it?
No,
Okay.
I did, I'm sorry.
Mr. Lucy.
Okay, so we have, before we get kind of started here with this, we've had our third iReady assessment, open book reading and math. It just actually finished. The window closed last week, so Wednesday last week. So before we kind of get into it, let's see if I can make this still work. Come on. Yes, so before we get into the update, just as a reminder, we started this year with this academic focus to get to know where our students were at academically, to take time to analyze the data, and from this analysis, provide impactful instruction and support. And then we also have a metric. So there's a metric that's within the LCAP that makes us strive to show positive progress toward our outcomes as a result of our efforts in providing data-based instructional and support actions. So there is a great deal to be excited about when looking at where we have come within one school year, within this particular school year. With reading, we have reduced our at-risk students as compared to the beginning of the year and have increased our students who are at or above grade level. So as you can see there on the screen, we went from 26% of our students were at the at-risk level, and at the end of the year, that was reduced to 16. Our goal was 15% or less, but we made a significant progress in that area. And then along those same lines, the areas where our students were at grade level, we went from 38 to 61% from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And then if you break it down by grade levels, across the district, we see the same trend in the reduction of at-risk and the increase in at or above grade level when compared to the beginning of the year, when comparing the beginning of the year to the end of the year. You can see the greens have gotten bigger and the reds have gotten smaller across the grade levels. And in math, we see the same trend. We had 26% at the beginning of the year at risk, and we cut that in half, so 13% at the end, which is below our 15% desired outcome. And then we had 26% of our students at or above grade level, and that increased to 59%, an increase of 33%. And again, if you look at it broken down by grade levels, especially at grades 5, grades 1, and grades 3, there was a significant increase in our at or above grade level, while a significant decline in our at-risk levels. So the annual growth. So we're kind of switching here over to, because we're looking at how we have been able to move our students from a lower placement level. Previously, in the previous slides, we were looking at how we were able to move our students from a lower placement level to a higher placement level, but that only tells part of the story. We also look at individual student growth of each of our students that are designed to tell us that if we are providing instruction that is impactful and providing supports that meet individual student needs, then we should see, if we do that, we should see typical growth, and hopefully we should see some of our students reach their stretch growth goals. And this is kind of an explanation. I think this slide was at one of the previous presentations when we had our mid-year review of our data, just explaining what typical growth is versus stretch growth. And so within reading, and this is just broken down by grade levels, you could see that we are at, from 56% to 64%, or 55% to 64% of our students made typical growth. And in stretch goal growth, we had at 5th grade 26%, but as high as 3rd grade, 37% of our students reached those stretch goals. And then in mathematics, it's the same thing. We even had, like in 6th grade, we had 75%, which is a large percentage of students that met their typical growth. But we had nothing lower than 50% of our students at any particular grade level that did not meet their typical growth. And then our stretch growth, we had from 23 to 39% of our students, depending on the grade level, meet their stretch growth goals. This work that we did this year was a great springboard to our continued efforts in this area. Really the big celebration is that although we're not all the way there, we did have a significant amount of time that was spent on looking at this data, analyzing it, and then taking action, making specific actions at schools, within classrooms, within individual students to meet those students' need based off the data they're saying, which is relatively a new thing that's been done collaboratively across schools and across grade levels because they were all looking at common data, which was really the big plus in all of this. So I personally feel very hopeful that these numbers that you see now are going to even get better as we go into year 2 of this and so on. So I think that really needed to be said about how impactful this idea of a comprehensive assessment system, and then on top of that, being able to act on that data and being able to have time to act on that data. Any questions? Yes.
So I understand the iReady diagnostic assessment. It's at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. It tests for, so let's say I'm in 4th grade. It tests for my 4th grade level knowledge at the beginning of the year, and then it tests again for my 4th grade level knowledge at the end of the year, right? It's the same standards effectively that they're testing on. Is that right?
Yeah, well, actually, it tests standards at the grade level, but it also tests standards above the grade level and below the grade level. So it's a computer adaptive test, so that they answer a series of questions, and then it kind of directs them to questions that are based off how they answered those other questions. So, I mean, the idea is, which is something that was, I know might have been difficult for some students, is that, you know, when they finish the test, they've gotten probably 50% of those questions right and 50% of those questions wrong, because of how it gears them to a level and says, oh, this is where your level is based on how you answered questions that were below grade level, above grade level, and then how you answer those actually triggered the next question or next series of questions. So it really is actually asking questions at various different grade levels. So.
Yeah, that's great. And I think next year it will help us kind of calibrate what level of growth you know, we should be looking at and expecting. Because the question that I had was around typical level of growth. Like, typical seems like what everybody should get. And so that's where I was a little confused on, is 50% good for typical growth, or, you know, is the expectation 100% get typical growth?
That would be our hope and desire, is
Yeah.
getting those numbers up for the typical growth. Because we had a lot to make up, and so that you know, we did make some of that, but we'd love to see all kids make the typical year's worth of growth. And then we also know for the kids that are in the red section that they have to make more than a year's growth. So what's the need there?
Those growth, typical growth, it you know, in talking with the people from iReady, they talk about typical growth. Sometimes it's misconstrued as typical growth. In fact, when they saw our numbers, my contact there said, your numbers for typical growth for your first year of this program are very high. Usually you're in like the 30 to 40 range across the board, but we're 50 or above. So, because when I first looked at it, I said, God, we should be at 80 or 90. I mean, this is, you know, typical growth. We should be making typical growth. I mean, I understand the year was challenging, but at the same time, but they said that it was for any typical year that it was actually really high numbers.
And our scores at 6, 7, and 8 were very high.
Yeah.
It is like that treatment worked.
Yeah. So that typical, the word typical in that.
Yeah, I think that the definition
doesn't
got
really.
me.
Yeah. But I think you're. I mean, I know you're right in that once we have calibrated it a bit more, because I mean, you talk to many of the teachers out there that gave it. There were students that normally are not frustrated with assessments were frustrated because, you know, if you're going into an assessment and you know that you're going to get half of them right, half of them wrong, that sometimes, you know, doesn't work for some students.
Other questions? So we're in an interesting part on the agenda on this piece, which is we cannot move forward because it's a public hearing. So are there any other questions that you may have about the formative assessment?
I can talk a lot longer.
I'll go ahead and throw out a question. So is there a national metric, a national average? I think maybe you might have showed that at one point, but that we can compare ourselves and see
It's not, the I-ready assessment's not a norm referenced assessment, so you can't really compare it nationally, but they do have this component that we haven't utilized yet because we don't have enough of data where it tells you where you would land. It predicts where you would land on the CASP assessment. So, and it's actually, you know, I could go in there and find where that area was, but because our last few CASP testings are not as valid as we would want them to be, for reasons being that we didn't take it 2 years ago, and last year we had a handful of students that just didn't take it, you know, like, so it's hard to, I didn't want to bring that piece in, but that's really our way of gauging, like a predictor of how they would do on CASP by the end. So that's another exciting thing next year is like, as we move forward, we can get an idea after the mid-year one. This is kind of where our students are probably going to be on the CASP, you know, what level they'll be at the end. So.
It's just a sensitive conversation, is that's a mathematical, you know, calculation in terms of where they will be. We want to be really clear that we're using iReady to help us know where students are all along the way, and it's not ultimately how this results in CASP testing. That's one piece of that, but the data that's really important for the teacher is, how are kids doing at the beginning of the school year? How do we group students so that they're getting what the needs are? And one of the things that's helpful about iReady is that there's actually a piece on the teacher dashboard that would say student groups and put kids in groups and say, these students need this. And they do that for both mathematics and reading. So that's a more valuable tool than a predictor of CASP testing.
Yeah, there was one of the things that came up that surfaced at a number of different sites was this idea of the bands, you know, what specific content band within mathematics and within reading, like for instance, phonics or phonemic awareness or number. Those were the things that when they were collaborating on it, they were saying, okay, this is an area that we can work on as a staff because it's something that's staff-wide. That surfaced because of these collaborations, and that's, I think, where the value is. That's where because you're not talking about interventions, you're actually really talking about first instruction. You know, like, okay, what can we do in that area?
And so on that point, what was the general feedback from teachers on being able to understand the needs of students and then action the right treatments and support for students? Was that, how did that go this year? Understanding that it is the first year of implementation.
I think there was a lot of excitement at the beginning, especially during our first PD day when they actually broke down or they looked at their data from that first assessment. There was definitely a sense of excitement because they had this gauge now, they had this understanding of where their students were. They actually were looking forward to the second assessment. But it was mixed in many other ways. Some felt, that it was, too much assessing. Some felt that the scores weren't accurate because of this because of this computer adaptive test part that needed to be kind of gotten used to. But for the most part, coming out of this year, I think most of the teachers feel like that this was just another place where they can really think about their first instruction, but also think about what interventions would be most impactful instead of it being somewhat of a guessing game about, oh, I'll try this and then we'll try this. That was my general sense.
I think one of the things I heard when I was subbing in January was I think people were surprised to see so many students' scores improve. I think they didn't necessarily, we were in the thick of it, right? We didn't know how we were coming out of this, but I think they were pleasantly surprised, like, look, my kids are making progress. And that's always reassuring when that's, a little bit surprised, like, oh my gosh, look at this. So it was great.
Yeah, it's great to hear that it's more than what I already said other folks have seen. through their typical first year, because to that point, the treatments seem to have worked, the interventions seem to have.
Being in school really mattered, and when if we want to make it's probably a bit of a stretch of a conclusion, but if we look at the scores of the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders going up more quickly than others, or higher, more students had typical growth, I think it indicates that being in person in school mattered a lot to those kids. And they probably were impacted less by being out, by being in distance. And so we're able to quickly adjust, I guess. That's probably a bit of an interpretation, but that's my theory of action. Okay, we can very slowly move on to the next item.
All right. So the next item is going to be a public hearing item. It's the Learning Control and Accountability Plan and Annual Update. We need to start at 7:45, I guess.
We need to start at 7:45 and it's 7:42, so we can queue up the presentation slowly, and I'll just walk you through how this works. Is that at 7:45 we will open the public hearing. I do think we should do the presentation first because that makes sense. This is very much the similar presentation that we had at the board work study, but we're going to highlight just a few things. So we're not going to walk you through the whole entire presentation, just hit the highlights and a couple of things that we've mentioned, that we've brought up since the last work studies. Then we open the public hearing in which the public will have an opportunity to make any comments on the LCAP. And then that's the part that can't start before 7:45.
Okay.
So shall we do the presentation?
So yes, let's go ahead with the presentation. We'll see.
All right. So our story starts with, you've seen this slide before, and it starts with when we developed our 2021-2024 LCAP. I want to constantly remind it's a 3-year LCAP, and we're finishing our first year of it. Now we're going into we're planning for the second year. We first identified what students and staff need to know each student and their strengths and challenges based off this knowledge, what staff would need to know in addressing those needs. So we have this tiered system of support in addressing the social, emotional, and academic needs of the tiered system of supports is used. The universal tier is tier 1. The select tier 2 is for our at-risk students. And then the intensive tier 3 is for our high at-risk students. And then I didn't explain this the last time, but with this tiered system of support, it doesn't mean that a student is at a certain level and they stay at that level. They could go up and they can go back down depending on their needs. That's why that arrow is. So discussed at our last LCAP board work study. Now this is just general, but I did go back and actually look at the tape of that board meeting, and I wrote down all the kind of the major topics that was discussed amongst them, and these were a few of the main things that came up. We had the targeted ELA and math interventions. We were talking about targeted interventions versus first instruction, support for some students, and what does that look like for the support for all students. We were also gauging where our need is and how do we gauge our need for social, emotional, and mental health support. We were talking that alongside the conversation around the school site counselors. But there was that conversation about that initial need and our present need and what our future need may be. And then we talked about the budget expenditures in the LCAP and the total budget. There was this huge difference between what was spent within the LCAP versus what is spent totally in the budget. And then we also talked about the year span. So there are some actions that are just for a year, and then some actions are the actions for the entire 3 years. You just can continue. An example of that is the comprehensive monitoring system we have. We're going to be doing that for 3 years straight. So that's something that's ongoing. And then these were the items that were discussed at the special ed board work study. And the thing about these items were there was a lot of, all of them actually, were connected in some way to an action. Even though we weren't talking directly about the LCAP, much of what we talked about or what was discussed at this the special ed board work study was connected to an action. And what's there in parentheses is the actions that they would be connected to. I'm not going to read them to you, but those were the things that were discussed there. And then this is a slide that was in there, was here before, but it's what we learned from our educational partners through our surveys, through our meetings that we had with DLAC, Special Ed Advisory Committee, the San Mateo County LCAP team, our parent council, and so on, our labor partners. So these were some of the things that we learned from those conversations. And I highlighted 3 in particular because those are ones that I wouldn't consider them a totally a through line with all of our engagements, but they seem to be ones that keep surfacing. Every conversation we have with every different educational partner, these 3 ones seem to be coming up. And those were the need to prioritize mental health support, and the need for a targeted content interventions, and then the need for professional development and how we're going to manage that professional development, because there's a lot of professional development that seems to be needed in support of teachers and staff around curriculum implementation and in-class interventions. And then, as was stated before, but it's good to continue to state, is that we have a 3-step plan for a 3-year plan. So our 3 steps is understanding our students and the impact that the pandemic, but also just our impact from year to year had on our students and their families. To expand instructional emotional supports for students, to constantly look at what kind of instructional and social emotional supports we need for students, and make sure it's in connection with the knowledge we have of our students and where they're at, and then understanding our impact on student success for all students. There's 3 goals. These are the same goals that we've had. Condition of learning, improved academic outcomes, and improved social emotional wellness and mental health for students. And then our first goal is around having a highly qualified staff, a diverse qualified staff, having instructional materials that are aligned, and having safe facilities, and also having safe protocols, which seem to become more and more important every day. Safety protocols within our schools, at our schools. And then the actions.
I think why don't we just kind of keep going?
Yeah, so they're the actions. Action 1, goal 2. Math and English language arts. Is around student outcomes and instructional decisions and developing supports and intervention plans. I don't need to read this to you, but there they are. Those are some of the actions, or kind of a general statements of these actions. Goal 3 is around social emotional mental health support for our students, promoting a positive climate and meaningful family engagement, and making sure we have opportunities for meaningful family engagement. And those are the action 3. And that's it.
All right, so with information, are there, so we ask?
Yep, so if I can just, do you mind if I read this? The Pacifica School District Board of Trustees is holding a public hearing to solicit the recommendations and comments of the public regarding the specific actions and expenditures proposed in the included LCAP or annual update of the LCAP. Details about the LCAP development and stakeholder engagement can be found in the stakeholder engagement section of the LCAP document. input of the draft of the LCAP was received from the trustees on May 11th, board work study. And so we should open this up for public comment, and there is one from Don Rigi.
Hello, can you hear me? All right, hi again. It's been a year since I've commented on science in Pacifica School District, and Pacifica's been without a K through 5 science curriculum that's aligned with the current state science standards, the NGSS, for quite some time. And so when reviewing the LCAP, I was just very relieved to see that the adoption of a science curriculum is part of the Goal 1 actions for the coming year. And I'm very excited to hear more about the process and also the curricular decision at future board meetings. Thanks for making science a priority in Pacifica.
Thank you, Don. Is there any more?
No.
No more speakers? Okay, at this point, we would close the public hearing. Are there any comments from the trustees? Questions or comments? What would happen next time is at the 15th, the meeting on the 15th, we would present both the LCAP and the budget for your approval. Thank you.
All right, next item is public hearing item regarding budget 2022-2023. Speaker is Josie Peterson.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to share the screen or is actually
Yes.
up on there?
I'll share the screen.
Okay, so we did review a lot of the budget from the governor's May revision at our last study session. So tonight I just want to give you some additional details that came out of the governor's May revision. You can go ahead and move forward, please. And go ahead and go forward. So this is an update of the updated state revenues and expenditures, and go ahead and move forward. And so this is an interesting chart put on from school services, and it kind of depicts the LCFF funding factors. Starting at the bottom of the chart, you can see there is the base grant per student. And then with the May revision, the governor has proposed a 6.56% COLA that would be added onto that amount per student. In addition to that, there's grade span adjustments. If you have kindergartner through third graders at 24-to-1, you receive additional funding. And then on top of that, supplemental and concentration grants are based on your unduplicated student counts. There's additional funding. And then what the governor proposed in his May revision is an additional $2.1 billion of ongoing increase to the LCFF base funding. And if you go forward, we have a little bit more details on the actual dollar amounts of the LCFF funding factors. So just looking at the first column, you can see kindergarten through third grade. The base amount is just over $8,000. The COLA adds $531, and then his proposal to increase the base adds another $266. And then with the grade span, so for a total you have just under $10,000, and then your unduplicated students receive additional funding of under $2,000. So that chart just gives you the details of the funding per student. And you can go ahead and go forward, please. So another item that was in the governor's May revision that we didn't talk about last time was he's proposing a discretionary block grant. And so he's proposing about $1,500 per student, and it would be at the board's discretion of how those funds are spent, as long as they are spent on one-time purposes. And there is some intent language in his proposal that you use the funds to address student learning challenges, protect staff levels, and to continue to support the mental health of both the students and the staff. Move forward, please. Okay, the other item that was added to the May revision is deferred maintenance. We talked a lot about that in our district, the lack of funding for deferred maintenance. So his current proposal would add funding to deferred maintenance along with districts needing to prepare a deferred maintenance plan. And the minimal funding per school district would be $100,000. So that's an addition that we hadn't talked about before. Go ahead and go forward. So some items that are not in the governor's May revision, which we've talked a little bit about, is the pension funding. Districts are paying more and more for both teachers and classifieds retirement costs, and there is no pension relief in the governor's May revision. Transportation funding is not a big impact for Pacifica, but the unduplicated student for universal meals funding is also not included in the May revision. Go forward. So again, the school services points out there's always risks in the budget package, and we're all hearing about those things right now. The inflation, supply chain bottlenecks, and again, the volatility of the stock market and the war. So those are things that we're just kind of keeping in our mind as we build our budget and look at long-term forecasting. Go ahead and go forward. So that was just a quick snapshot of some of the highlights of the governor's budget. The Pacifica School District's budget is going to be based on the governor's May revision for the most part, but we have to keep in mind that the governor cannot pass the budget alone. Now the Assembly and the Senate will weigh in on his proposals, and there are some items in the May revision that will be determined after they weigh in, and then you all know that the final budget is not passed until June. And so that's when we'll be able to change our budget, and you'll see that at our first interim in November. So again, our objective is our budget does contain detailed budget and multi-year projections, and we need to identify if we can maintain a positive status, which means we'll be able to meet our obligations for the current and 2 subsequent fiscal years. Qualified is you may not be able to meet, and negative is if you are currently not able to meet your obligations. Those are the 3 choices. And go forward. So this is a review of the assumptions that we've gone over some of these. The local control funding formula, it does list the COLAs, the cost of living increases per year, 6.56% for the budget year, 5.38% and 4.02% in the following years. Those are the areas where it's always subject to change. As you see, the budget packages get passed and some of the COLAs change. It's called the dartboard. And our attendance, one of the changes since we last talked was the governor did add a 3-year rolling average for attendance. So we've lost about 300 students over the last 2 to 3 years. And now with his package, we're able to average our attendance over 3 years. And so that was a big impact for Pacifica School District, and this budget is built on that higher average. And then supplemental funds, those are our unduplicated students for Pacifica. It's about $1.2 million. Go forward, please. So some of the items that are not yet included in our budget that is presented tonight for the public hearing is his proposal to increase the base funding. For Pacifica, it's about $765,000. The state has not yet updated their calculator, and given that the legislator still has to weigh in, we have not yet included that in our budget. And the one-time discretionary funding for Pacifica is about $3.9 million. Again, the Senate and the Assembly have to weigh in, so it's not yet included. And special education revenue, we will get those figures from the San Mateo County Office of Education because it does funnel through them. So we'll update that. And deferred maintenance, we will need to come to the board to establish a 2022-23 deferred maintenance fund. And then we can, if the final state budget includes that, we would add that to our budget as well. Look forward. And then this is really the same as we presented last time. The expenditure budget assumptions for Pacifica School District, we went through these. There isn't any changes. Just to kind of highlight, we always have ongoing operational costs. For employee costs with the pension funds, you can see we pay over 19% into a teacher's retirement and 25% into a classified. Employees do move up at the salary schedule. It's called step and column. And then health benefit increases. And then the other operational increases we discussed last time. So again, there's uncertainties in our budget, and this is just a list of some of them. We have to see what the governor's the final state budget will be in June. the final COLA, increase to base, and what they call the ADA lift if the proposal is finalized in June. And then the dartboard projections change for our multi-year. We're carefully looking at our enrollment and our staffing, and then contributions to other programs. Can we go forward? So here's a snapshot of our multi-year summary. You have the full packet attached, but it does show the total revenues per year, which we went over with you last time, and the expenditures and the ending fund balance. And if you go forward, we have a slide on where the Pacifica School District reserves are. So we are required to put aside 3% reserve for economic uncertainty. And then after we put that amount aside over the 3 years, there is an unappropriated unassigned balance. And then you can see what the total, the way they calculate reserves is how much cash you have in the bank divided by your total expenditures. And that's how the reserve percentage is calculated. So we will be projecting to end the year with 7.6% reserve in the general fund. And then when you add Fund 17, it's just under 10% in the budget year and goes up to 15% in the 3-year projection. And that is because we do not yet have our employee compensation increases built into this budget. And we are hopeful that we can complete negotiations before the end of the year so that we can update our, when we come back, we'll have a full budget update to you. Go ahead and move forward. And then this is just the regular slide you see on statewide averages. What they recommend is that you have maintain your reserves for, and go ahead and go forward because we've gone over this slide before, Will. Just kind of maintain reserves, and these are all the reasons. Pacifica has experienced some of these things in the past, for example, fluctuations in enrollment and one-time unanticipated expenditures are things we've all seen in the past. So just something to consider when looking at reserves. So we are recommending that the district is self-certifying as a positive for this budget certification. And I think that's it. Go forward. Next steps. So again, we're waiting for the final budget in June. And then our board will adopt our budget on June 15th, along with the LCAP. After that, we'll finalize our staffing, enrollment, and finalize state revenues, and bring a revised budget to you at the interim in November. So that's a quick summary. I know we've talked about some of it before, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Or actually, it's a public hearing, right?
This is the public hearing. So the budget assumptions and updates leading to the budget were reviewed with the board at the May 18th work study. Per state law, the budget's been available to the public for review beginning on March 27th. Official notices as to the availability of the budget for public review is posted in the Pacifica Tribune. And so at this point, we would like to open the public hearing for any public comment or review of the budget.
I don't see any.
I'll just talk about the next steps while we're waiting for any public comment that we may have. So the state budget will be adopted by the end of June, and then the district would begin revising the budget this summer to reflect the actual state budget, final employee salary and health benefit costs, and then the first interim report is presented to you in November with more accurate information around our costs. So one of the things that is challenging is there was the budget proposal and the May revision. Ms. Peterson routinely reminds me that it's not final until it gets passed, and that's at the end of June, which is an incredible challenge as we look at how to best spend our money, not being absolutely sure that that money is going to be there. Is there any public comments from the public? That being said, we will close the public hearing at this time. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Yes. So the slide that you showed, the multi-year summary, am I to understand that includes all of the expected costs increases that you described, like the STRS, PERS, all the retirement acronyms that I may not get right, but it does not include the like 4.7 million or so expected additional funding from the May revision.
Yeah, could you go forward? Will?
That is
Which one?
correct.
Keep going forward.
Which slide?
I think it's slide 17.
Right there.
Yeah, that is correct.
Back.
Okay.
It does include our current anticipated increases in expenditures and the projections given to us by CalSTRS and CalPERS, and all of those are included in the expenditures. It does not include employee compensation expenditures, and it does not include, as far as revenues go, there's a couple proposals in the May revision. One was increasing your ADA to a 3-year average. It does include that. It includes the COLA. It does not include the permanent increase to base funding yet, and it does not include the one-time discretionary funding yet. So those were on a different slide, the things that were not included.
Yeah, so I think that's what I was just commenting on. So is the thought then that some of that stuff, I guess, I mean, it's a substantial sum if that
Yes.
comes into play. I think like I'm estimating it 4.6 million or whatever it actually turns out to
Yes.
be. How is the planning of that happen? You know, it's effectively more than like 10% of our budget.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. So in one area, it's ongoing. If they do pass the increase to base funding, that $700,000+ is ongoing. And the other two categories would be one-time as far as planning purposes. So the one-time discretionary funding, you have a period of, I think it's 3 years is the proposal to spend those funds. So there would be plenty of time for planning for those one-time discretionary funds. And then for the deferred maintenance, $100,000, you would also have some time for planning because you would need to establish a new fund and create a deferred maintenance plan. So that's a very good point. To me, this is a conservative budget because that is the governor's proposal. But when you read through some of the May revision, what does the Senate say, what does the Assembly say, the one-time discretionary funding could be adjusted or could be changed, the nature of the way the funds are spent. And then the increase to base is the governor's proposal. Again, will that pass? We're not 100% sure. We feel pretty confident about the ADA cliff because that has been an ongoing issue that's been talked about since January. But the other items, this is conservative, not including it. And also because the state has not updated their calculators. So in including it, you'd be kind of not including the exact numbers in that case as well.
Can I just some things that have come up through the year? The question I hear most often from teachers is, are we going to have counselors next year? We are going to have counselors next year, paid for in the second year with the COVID funding, but that's not in our budget expenditures in the future. And so because the substantial amount of one-time fund may allow us to put some of that money aside to help expend that for years 3, 4, and 5, that would be one really important use of that. And then as we look at new instructional materials that are very, very expensive, those are a one-time expenditure more or less. Every once in a while there's an ongoing cost, but that would be something that we could use that for. So
It's
we're not
also good to know that there's a 3-year time frame.
That's a great question. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to the next public hearing. 2022 to 2023, reserves in excess of state minimum level. Again, Josie Peters.
Okay, thank you. This goes back to 2015-16 Senate Bill 858, where when school districts have more than the minimum reserve, and this item is actually an annual item for us because our minimum reserve is 3%. So we have maintained more than 3% over the last several years. And so there's a couple documents attached, and I can kind of read them off to you. So for the 2022-23 budget year, we demonstrate what our ending fund balance is in the general fund and in Fund 17, which adds up to about $3.4 million. when you subtract the required reserve for economic uncertainty, it leaves you a balance of $2.3 million. And so what we have done is demonstrated that that reserve is to cover employee compensation over that 3-year period and other operational increases, and also our revolving cash account. And in Fund 17, that is a board-designated reserve under Board Policy 3100. And so that, the board had intended for Fund 17 to maintain a minimum fund balance, to maintain fiscal solvency and stability, to protect the district against unforeseen circumstances. And so that's for 2022-23. It's pretty much the same for 23-24 and 24-25. It demonstrates the ending fund balance and those exact same designations for those 3 years.
Oh, I'm sleeping on my public comment, sorry. Let's see, here we go. School district shall provide at the hearing separate from the public hearing on the budget, so this is a separate public hearing. The minimum reserve required each year, the amount of assigned and unassigned ending fund balance that exceeds the minimum in each year, and reasons for the reserve being greater than the minimum. The requirement is in place for the adopted budget and the multi-year projections submitted with it. And then the attached statements were made available for public review and discussion at tonight's meeting. So we will officially open the public hearing around the reserves in excess of the state minimum level. Are there any public comment?
None.
Okay. Hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Are there any questions or comments from the board? This is a weird thing to do every single year because we do not have an excess reserve, and it's, as a district that struggles at different times with maintaining a reserve, this is a very hard, regular, yearly item to have. Okay, anything else?
All right. Let's see, approval of, so we'll move on to item E, approval of resolution number 2022-06-01-A, budgetary increases and transfers at end of year end, excuse me. And again, Josie.
Thank you. This is another routine year-end item, and there's a resolution before the board to approve tonight. In order for us to close our books in the end of June, we will need to make budget transfers. For example, if we spend more funds in, let's say, teacher salaries than books and supplies, we would transfer those funds from that category to the other category. And so we're asking the board tonight to authorize us to be able to make those transfers and be able to close our books without having any negative balances in any accounts.
All right, are there any questions regarding this resolution? All right, do I have a motion to adopt resolution 2022-06-01-A, budgetary increases and transfers at year end? Do I have a motion to approve?
Well, motion to approve the budgetary increase and transfers at year end.
And second?
Second?
And Barbara, if you can take the vote.
All in favor, please raise your hands. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
All right. Item F, approval of resolution number 2022-06-01-B, education protection account. Again, Josie.
Okay, thank you. We have another resolution before the board that we bring every year since the passage of Prop 30. And when Prop 30 was passed, it was meant for the state to have this education protection account for school districts in years when there is low funding or when you've heard state deferrals. They put this money aside to ensure that we get a quarterly payment during the year. We get 4 payments out of the education protection account. And these payments are really just part of our LCFF funding, but it's categorized differently, and so they want us to account for it differently. And we do account for it in a separate code. And we are to make public every year how we spend those funds. And there's some sheets attached to the resolution that shows in 21-22, the whole $567,000 was spent towards instructional services, it's teacher salaries. And then in the budget year proposed, there's a proposal of $566,000 also to be spent on instructional. Now, these amounts are calculated by the state, and it does fluctuate based on your LCFF calculation and based on how much property taxes you get versus LCFF funds. And for us, it changed a lot this year. These are just the most recent estimates that the state has given us and paid us throughout the year. And we will also be posting this on our website for public viewing. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Questions? Nope, okay. Do I have a motion to adopt resolution 2022-06-1-B, education protection account?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2022-06-01B EPA.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Barbara, will you take the vote?
Yes, I'm all good with the resolution. Motion passes 4-0, thank you.
All right. Next is item G, Valamar School Principal.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. It is recommended tonight that the Board of Trustees approve the hiring of Kim Norgard as principal of Valamar K-8 school for the 2022-2023 school year. Kim Norgard was selected as the next Valamar K-8 school principal from a pool of highly qualified candidates. I believe we are going to say just a little bit about her, and then I believe she's going to speak tonight.
Yep, absolutely. Would somebody pull her up as a panelist with video and audio? But I get to talk to her. I was a part of the second round of interviews. But we're thrilled to announce, so as we built the board agenda on Friday, we weren't completely certain that we'd be all the way through this process. The fact that we are is just great news. So we've completed the process and we've selected Kim Norgard as the new principal of Valamar School, pending your approval and completion of the hiring process, which includes fingerprints. Mrs. Norgard has many of the qualities staff and parents listed as important in the next leader. Strong communication skills, strong instructional background, and the capacity to lead through transitions as we both recover from the pandemic and embark on construction at the school. She's currently a teacher and summer school principal in San Carlos School District. She's been a classroom teacher and a reading intervention teacher in San Carlos and Palo Alto school districts. At the beginning of the pandemic, she was a well-regarded presenter in Distance for TK to grade 12 education series through San Mateo County Office of Ed. Any of our staff that were a part of that were very impressed with her presentation. So not only is she a teacher of students, she's a teacher of teachers. Mrs. Norgard led in-person instruction as the interim principal at White Oak School. So we really look forward to the collaboration as we continue to develop a rigorous, inclusive, and supportive learning environment at Valamar School. Both teachers and staff are very proud of the work that they've been doing at school and want to continue that. So this appointment is again pending your approval. This announcement went out to both parents and staff today, so that's why we were really reinforcing the pending board approval. So we are really grateful, and I can have Dr. Torres talk just a bit about the process, but there were 2 interview panels, one with staff and parents, and then the second panel was yesterday with cabinet, and then we did a checking of references. So anything else you want to say about the process, Dr. Torres?
No, we posted it on EdJoin and we screened the applicants. There was about 10 applications and 6 of them were selected for the first round of interviews. And then of those 6, 3 were selected for the second round, and Kim was selected as the finalist, and we offered her the position.
So I never know quite the order of this. Should we approve and then have the candidates speak? Does that seem like that would be the best thing to do? So I would ask for your approval of Mrs. Kim Norgard as the next principal of Valamar School beginning on July 1st.
I should probably ask if there are any questions before we approve. Okay, or before we vote. So do I have a motion to approve the hiring of Kim Norgard as principal of Alomar School for the 2022-23 school year?
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, do I have a second? All right. Barbara, can you take the vote?
Yes, all in favor, please raise your hands. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Okay, Kim, would you like to welcome Kim? Let's see if we can get her on the screen there. Hi there.
Hello. Let me know if you can hear me.
We got you. Congratulations.
Good. Well, I'm honored to be selected to serve as the Valamar Elementary School principal and to also serve the Pacifica School District and your warm and welcoming community here in Pacifica. I've heard many wonderful things about you and about your school district, and I cannot wait to start. One of my most trustworthy friends was an educator at Valamar and has shared her love for the school over the years that we've been friends and colleagues. As I drove towards the ocean to meet the selection panel, I saw the shoreline and I just felt this surge of joy that only the ocean can ignite in me. And I'm just super excited about this opportunity, and I look forward to meeting everyone in person soon and learning more about your community. So thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Good thing we had good weather on the days. To have completed that process at this incredibly busy time of year took people committing a whole day of interviews, and just very, very pleased that we were able to get through that process. So thank you, Dr. Torres.
Yeah.
All right. All right, H, approval to hire a coordinator of special education and approval of job description.
It is recommended that the Board of Trustees approve Pacifica School District to hire a coordinator of special education for the school year 2022 to 2023. A job description for the new position of a coordinator of special education was developed and attached for board approval. Pacifica School District sees a need to hire a coordinator of special education to support the coordination of special education services district-wide. Most recently, School Services of California did a comprehensive special education study in our school district. Part of the findings show that we are in need of additional staffing to support the coordination of the special education program in our school district to support our Department of Special Education and Student Services.
All right, are there any questions regarding this item? I just have one, because I think John probably, so does this fit the needs? You guys talked it all through and we're gonna hit the mark, so, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
For sure. It will, many of the recommendations, aside from the staffing recommendations, in order to kind of, follow through with those recommendations, we do need the extra support to do so. So, would be really excited to be able to add this staff.
Great. All right, so any other questions? No? Do we have a motion to approve the hiring of a coordinator of special education and as well as the related job description?
I'll make a motion for the hiring of a coordinator of special education, including the job description.
And I'll second that. Barbara, will you take a vote?
Yes, all in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
We hope to have that position posted as quickly as we possibly can, and I don't know if it's realistic to think that we could bring something back to you by the 15th, but we're going to do our darndest to get that done.
All right, so we already did I. We'll move on to J, which is the transitional kindergarten plan. Mr. Lucy.
I actually will do this one, is that I put this in as a placeholder with the hope that I would have had a little bit more time to make some progress on the TK plan. So by the 30th of June, which means next meeting, the 15th, we will bring to you a preliminary plan. We know that we're going to have either 3 or 4 classes next year. We intend to have 2 classes at Ortega next year and most likely 2 classes at Sunset Ridge. The class size for next year is a 12-to-1 adult to student ratio. We intend to have 24 students in each class with additional paraeducator support in order to meet that ratio. Really the work, the long-term work around TK is around long-term planning. So how do we roll this out over the next 3 years? And for us, that means spaces. Where are the classrooms going to be? What would a TK classroom look like? And where is the need? And so some of that work will be done by the administrator for special projects. But there's more long-term planning that I'm going to be able to get done by the time that we bring this forward. But we are committed to providing a quality TK program. The good news is where we're a little bit better off is there are a number of districts that don't currently offer TK. And so this is a complete start over for them. We have continued to offer TK and hope to build on that. So some of the challenges that will be coming up are around staffing, not necessarily for next year, but for the future years, the qualifications or experiences that the teachers need to have. And so that's going to be the work that the administrator for special projects will be working on in the future years. That's all I can report to you at this time.
Are there any questions regarding that item? All right,
That was just for your information.
all right, we're on to future agenda items.
So this is not necessarily meeting related, but one of the things that would be helpful is if Barbara knew which graduations you were going to, because it's always good for the principal to know that you're going to be there so that they can introduce you. We've all gotten out of the habit just because of the pandemic, but in general, when trustees are at a district event or a school event, we would always want to introduce you. And part of it is that we haven't been having big events, but we'd love to get back in that habit. So if you'd let Barbara know which graduations you'll be able to attend. And then the second piece to think about, I don't need answers on this one, but would be each of you take a school for the whole school year. And so as we go into this, last year we just did the schools that we had before, but it's time to switch. So if you have some interest, please let me know, and we'll try to get those interests matched with the trustee that's interested in being connected. It's really important to be connected in that way, and you think about the relationships that get established and getting to see students change over the year. So that's, I think, a really valuable tradition. Are there any other agenda items that you would like for the 15th of June? We're still aiming to not have a July meeting, but we'll wait until next meeting to cancel that.
So if there's no other agenda items, can go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 8:28.
Record.